Do you have a well-documented succession plan for recruiting the head of school? Is your school going to need to recruit a new head soon? Or would you know what to do if there was an emergency that required a change of plan? In this video, we explore the steps and considerations for the successful recruitment of a head of school. The head of school appointment is a critical decision for the board, and so a thorough approach to the recruitment and interview process is essential. Whether this process is done completely in-house, or the shortlisting is done by a specialist consultant, it's nevertheless a significant milestone in the work of the board, and it must be approached with the commitment that it requires. Ideally, you already have a succession plan in place, which gives you details of the steps and timelines involved. If not, then maybe you should document the steps you're taking now and the lessons learned in order to create a clear roadmap for the future head of school recruitment. It's the board that appoints the head of school. During the recruitment process, the board may choose to enlist the help of a recruitment consultant to guide the process and conduct preliminary interviews and shortlists. You may also include other stakeholders in the interview process, perhaps involving parents, leadership, staff, students, and of course, trustees. But ultimately, it's the board that takes the final decision on the appointment of the head of school. The first stage would be for the board to formulate a broad plan of how the process will be managed and to create a selection committee from the trustees who will work on the details. While the committee may also include non-board members, its primary function is to do the heavy lifting of the recruitment, leading to the recommendation for the whole board, and therefore must have the weight of the trustees leading this committee. This selection committee will then work on a more detailed framework and action plan. One of the first tasks would be to identify the timescale and to establish any critical marker points along the way. It's easy to be lulled into a false sense of security, thinking that the start date is, say, August the 1st or September the 1st. It may seem such a long way away in the future, but it's important to work backwards to plan the mile markers along the way. Head of school appointments are key to the success of the school and are often planned a year in advance, and in many cases, much longer. If you're not familiar with all the details of immigration requirements, etc., if work permits are involved, then solicit the input from the administrators within the school or the current head of school that deals with a recruitment so you understand what the requirements and timescales are. It's not uncommon for work permit applications to be filed and approved before the newly appointed staff can even travel, and this process of getting the work permits may take several months. Therefore, you'll need to work backwards from any such deadlines, back through the appointment, interviews and shortlisting to where you are now. Once you've identified a timeline, you'll be able to see where the pressure points will be for trustees. Those periods where a great deal of time will be required to review applications and to follow up with candidates, and during any interview periods where people need to ensure that they're available. It's often at this point that search committees start to doubt that they'll have the time to really commit to such a task, and they seek assistance and advice from a recruitment consultant. Once you're presented with the costs involved of managing the process, you may be happy to go ahead and leave the specialists to do their work. Or maybe you have budgetary constraints that force your hand and you have to find the time yourself. Either way, alongside the timescale plans, you'll actually need to identify budgetary considerations for the recruitment process. And the board has obviously procedures for feeding this into the finance committee for their support and then probably onto the whole board for approval. Actually, there goes your first month. It may be that you already have a budget line item for the head of school recruitment. If the departure was planned the previous year, maybe that line item is already there. But you'd need to factor in agency fees if you're planning to use a recruitment consultant. Then you've got advertising costs, which could run to thousands of dollars or pounds or euros. Placement fees if you're planning to use recruitment agencies. And the costs incurred for interviews. In the final round of interviews, it's common for the shortlisted 3 or 4 candidates to be invited to school for 2 or 3 days of face-to-face sessions, meetings, interviews, often accompanied by their spouse. So you have to factor in flights and accommodation and meals. All of these need to be built into the anticipated costs. Okay, so assuming you have an outline plan and budget approved, what next? Maybe just brush off the last advert that you used and send it out? Actually, no, there's probably a lot more to be done. You're going to want to think about a communication strategy. While the imminent departure of the head may be confidential among the board, sooner or later, and especially once the position is advertised, then it'll be big news in the community, and it's therefore preferable to be proactive and transparent in the forthcoming process of recruiting a suitable replacement. Parents and staff will be reassured if the board informs them before rumours leak that a selection committee has been formed and an action plan is in place. Remember that this is a key appointment, and while parents will be curious and perhaps excited by the prospect of a new head, many of the staff may be very anxious as they may be fearful of their job security and working environment. The school is in a different place now to the last time that you advertised, and so the world has moved on, and the first thing would be for the selection committee to compile an analysis of where the school is now and what are the strategic goals that will give some indication as to the type of character and particular skills that you will need to have in place. This may be an opportunity to consult with a current leadership or perhaps the PTA or even students to seek their input into what character traits they would like to see in the position. Through this process, you'll build up a profile of essential and desirable knowledge, skills and dispositions that will feature in the advertisement and the shortlisting process. This profile will include qualifications and experience that would be seen as a minimum requirement. Having identified the person specifications, you'll need to review the job description and to ensure that it's up to date and reflective of the approaches that you're looking for and the strategic plans for the school. Unless there are people on the search committee that are used to leadership recruitment searches and HR, it may be tempting to look at the existing job description to see if it needs polishing or updating. However, the danger is that you follow the path of least resistance, like following the tracks of a car ahead during a snowstorm, without knowing if there are other paths out there that may be better. So instead, before you even look at the job description, you might want to jot down those elements of the person specifications and board goals and think about the desired impact that the head of school will have. Then, when you review the current job description, you'll have some ideas about what to look for to ensure the important facets of the job are indeed covered. This is like a gap analysis. The selection committee will then need to determine how and when it will advertise the position, and the exact wording and process. Given the confidential nature of the recruitment for this position, you may need to establish an independent email for applications that can be a distribution list directly to those people involved with reviewing candidates. You'll need to wordsmith the advertisement very carefully so that it can appeal to those suitable candidates while giving a flavour of the position and benefits. Most recruitment platforms nowadays are online and applications are all electronic, but you'll want to have thought about how you want to receive the data. Some schools require applicants to complete an online form that populates their database with basic details, qualifications, work history, etc., while other schools have access to shared platforms that do the same. These online platforms make the management of applications much more streamlined, since they can automate the process of sending acknowledgement emails and easy to make comparisons. Searching and sorting is obviously very easy, but they lack some of the individual character that comes across through an individual CV and application. Either way, it helps to have your requirements thought out in advance and clearly articulated, so potential candidates understand the process. So, for example, you may place a brief advert in the international press, let's say the Times Educational Supplement, for example, that directs interested candidates to a dedicated page on the school's website where there's more information about the process. Some agencies require CVs to be a 2-page A4 CV as a maximum, and that helps to ensure that everything is concise and relatively consistent. It can be very frustrating for the selection committee to receive a 20-page CV with all kinds of qualifications and certificates, 25-meter swimming certificate, etc., that just bloats your inbox. Some schools state in that advert that they retain the right to make appointments before the deadline, so should they find an exceptional candidate, they can snap them up. Unconsciously, it sends a message to potential applicants to encourage them to get their application in early and not to wait until the deadline, which of course helps you in getting ahead of the process of reviewing them. Personally, I've always reviewed each and every applicant that comes into the school, and I've responded to every application to at least acknowledge receipt. As the selection committee, you'll need to decide how applications are managed and who is responsible for that aspect of the process. While you may have the person specifications available on the landing page, on the recruitment landing page, typically interested candidates will also want to see the job description and any other information. A great way to manage this is to have a comprehensive information pack for candidates ready to be sent, whether to all candidates interested in the position or maybe just those long-listed. This information pack would include the person specifications in the job description, but it would also give a detailed insight into the school, its background, and the intended trajectory of the school. The successful candidate is going to be leading the school for years to come, so you'll want to ensure that they are philosophically aligned with the board's goals and ethos. This is an important guide for the prospective candidate to ensure that they are a good fit and to get them excited about the position. You can also see it's an essential marketing tool for the school. By outlining the challenges and opportunities, rich history and goals, you're more likely to receive applications that have been tailored to address your specific school and situation, rather than a generic crafted letter of application. While the school's website will have descriptions and images of the school's facilities, etc., go into more depth to paint a picture of the community, the faculty, the student demographics, and what it's like to live and work there. You'll also need to have a clear picture of the package on offer. Again, whether you share this with everyone at the beginning stage is up to you, although it's usual to outline the benefits even if the details of the salary are withheld. So, for example, what's included or subsidized in the package? Housing, utilities, flights. Are they annual flights? Is it for the person only or dependents? What about medical insurance or school fees for children, relocation allowances, etc.? While you leave the final negotiation of the package to the offer stage, you probably have to give an outline expectation of the salary, as unless your salary is really generous, it may filter out some candidates who have greater expectations than you can meet. And that's okay. So assuming that you've placed the advert and applications are starting to come in, you'll need to decide how they will be managed. If you're using a recruitment consultant, then you would have already agreed on the criteria for shortlisting. If you're managing the process in-house, then your person specifications with minimum qualification and experience will give you a guide for the first cut, and you can decide whether someone on the committee does this, or is it done as a group, as and when the applications come in, or whether you sit down together to review them as a whole committee. Even if you're not using application tracking software to manage candidates, there are several free or low-cost web-based solutions that can significantly help manage the applications as they're reviewed. Since all applications are coming in through email, you can easily set up a Kanban-type funnel that keeps track of each candidate in the shortlisting process and allows various committee members to add comments and see the correspondence going on. While the first cut of the culling process of applications, cutting out the people that don't meet the person specifications, is relatively straightforward, the process of reviewing applications to form a long list and short list is much more time-consuming and shouldn't be underestimated. While some applicants choose to include open testimonials, unless of course you specify otherwise, most recruitment consultants largely ignore these, as sadly you can't be 100% sure of their veracity, and with the increasing focus on child safeguarding, it's important to seek independently any written and verbal references. You'll want to be consistent with the criteria you're using to contrast and compare applications, with a view to the right fit for the school. The closer you get to the shortlist, the more thorough your research will need to be, which will include web searches, because if you don't do those, you can be sure that some of your parents and staff will. So it's important that you don't get caught out with any surprises. It's good practice to let the candidates know when they've been eliminated from consideration. They're probably trying to juggle other applications to different schools. And while that's not your problem, so to speak, in education circles, you want to be respectful of the delicacy of this senior appointment. Once you get to the final shortlist of 3 or 4 candidates, It's usual that these are invited to the school for a few days, which allows you to meet them in person, to observe and how they react in formal interviews and informal social settings with a range of stakeholders. Scheduling this can become a real problem, since you have to factor in trustee availability, the school's activities, and potentially bring in candidates, possibly with their spouse, from all over the world. So you'll need to decide if the candidates are to be in school at the same time, or maybe to stagger them. There are pros and cons of both approaches. Having the candidates on campus for a couple of days allows you to arrange for presentation to staff or discussion with parents and students. Of course, do remember that they also need some downtime on their schedule, maybe to keep up with their own work and emails, but also to relax and unwind. In this final phase of recruiting the head of school, you'll be negotiating any specific aspects of remuneration and the overall package. You want to avoid extended discussions at this stage. If the candidate had the required information beforehand, then negotiation should be straightforward, and it would leave you your backup choice if an agreement can't be found. Once you've let candidates leave the school from those final rounds of interviews, you risk them focusing their energy on alternative applications, and you may find yourself coming up empty. As alluded to earlier, you will already have solicited references before the interview phase. It's courteous to ask the candidate before calling for references, just in case he or she needs to alert their referees in advance, since it assumes they already know that they're looking for another job. You should check to ensure that the referees are suitably qualified to give a professional reference, and not just a character reference from friends. You should also look to see that at least one of the referees is from their most recent employment. The selection committee will want to determine whether the reference request is simply a free text, or whether it's a multiple choice form, or focused text responses against a set of questions that are pertinent to the demands of the job. All written references should seek information about the suitability for the head of school position and include specific questions about child safeguarding, convictions, etc. You'll also need to schedule telephone interviews with the referees, in part to verify that they are the bona fide authors and in a position of authority to provide the reference, but also to ask the harder questions about the suitability of the candidate. Remember to act in an ethical manner at all times. You're privy to private and confidential information, including the references from employers, and you should agree as a committee to respect that process in full. That includes the respectful ways in which you interact with the candidates, how you ensure materials remain confidential during the review process, and how you agree to destroy records from unsuccessful candidates. Remember too that you'll be marketing your school. Any recruitment process can lead to spreading of the good name of the school, and while returns take years, the investment of time to ensure the messages going out to the international school community are the ones that you want to share. Also remember that whomever is appointed as the new head of school will have formed their initial impressions of you and the professionalism of your board through those interactions. What is the status of your succession plan? Is it thoroughly documented? Have there been any changes to contracts or circumstances that may mean the timeline needs to be reviewed? If the worst happened and the head of school was hit by a bus, or more likely having a heart attack from all the stress of the job, is your board prepared for all the steps required to secure a replacement?